It's time for Robot Wars! And this time we're reviewing Series 2 of Robot Wars. Series 1 was a rough time, but we're finally starting to see things pick up, at least just a little bit, as we move into Series 2. Because, I know that for some of you, you might not have seen Robot Wars before, and I don't want Series 1 to be the representation that a lot of you come away with when it comes to Robot Wars. It's gonna get better from here, trust me. Even from once we move on from Series 2 to Series 3, it's gonna get a lot better. Anyway, I'm blabbering on, let's get into the review. Now already things feel more exciting this series, with a fun intro, as well as Craig Charles, who overall just brings more energy and is just far more excitable. He comes across like he isn't just a BBC presenter like Jeremy Clarkson, but someone who liked what he saw in Robot Wars. He seems genuinely passionate. Now the House robots are introduced with an exciting showcase, and while they still aren't quite the refined article we'd come to love, we do get the introduction of probably the most iconic House robot of them all, Sir Kill-A-Lot. Sir Kill-A-Lot is the largest at the time and overall the second largest House robot in the show's history, with a spinning lance and, more importantly, that giant grabbing claw to be able to lift robots up into the air. Let me tell you, if you've ever wondered just how big Sir Kill-A-Lot is, here he is next to Craig. Just look at him. That is crazy. It's sometimes difficult to really see just how large these robots can be, given the camera angle and how every robot's a little large, so you kind of lose sense of the scale. But when you see Craig standing next to Sir Kill-A-Lot, and it just really puts it into perspective, really. Now, they do show off the strength of Sir Kill-A-Lot's grabbing claw by having them snap a metal bar, which back then must have been a scary amount of power given the armor of your typical robot. Now, we get to see the contestants. First up is Victor, which is cute. Aside from the spinner, it really does not look all that competitive. Its coffin shape and large wheels really make it look unique. It weighs in at 85.1 kilograms. Then there's Napalm, which is infamous at this point, but I love it the same way you'd love the Room. It's so bizarre in everything it does, with the lifter that doesn't do anything except activate the chainsaw that we've even seen in Series 1 that those weapons struggle to do much. It comes weighing in at 84.1 kilograms. Then there's Pandemonium, which is a bit basic looking, but solid enough. Though its lifter also looks useless, much like Napalm's, as it comes across more as a lance to ram into opponents, as it's halfway up the robot, that's not getting under anything. We then get another infamous robot, Mr. Psycho's favourite, Pièce de Resistance, coming out with a wonky looking lifting scoop and these big bloodshot eyes. It just looks like some fish from hell. Then we have Caliban, which looked way better in its preview picture. I think it might have been the UK's first shell spinner, and honestly, for one that early on, it looks like it could have been pretty solid. Sadly, we only get to see it using its flails tonight. It weighs in at 54.4 kilograms. Then finally, Demolition Demon comes out, which was possibly the most solid looking robot. It's the most basic, with only a rear saw and a weird front spike to distinguish it, but generally there's not much to complain about, as we've seen this type of robot work decently well before. It comes weighing in at 67.9 kilograms. Now with the introductions out of the way, we get into the first challenge. They're bringing back the Gauntlet from Series 1. Only, instead of that stupid maze on the first route, which robots just kept getting stuck in, we now have Sir Kill-A-Lot guarding that route, with 2 pits for Kill-A-Lot to place opponents in. Napalm is up first and trundles over, and like an ad for Kool-Aid, busts right through the wall. Unfortunately, they do get caught up on the bricks and ramp, leaving them vulnerable to Kill-A-Lot, who lifts and bullies them, though actually ends up pushing them a little bit further in the end. Saying that Kill-A-Lot did knock the chainsaw off, so while they helped, they didn't leave quite unscathed, finishing with 7.5 meters on the scoreboard. Pandemonium was up next, who chose to go on the path on our right with the pushers, and while they struggle and get stuck initially, I can see Kill-A-Lot creeping in the background, considering if they can squeeze in, but trust me, if Pandemonium is struggling, then Kill-A-Lot, you are definitely not fitting there. But once Pandemonium does finally get past all that, they rush past Matilda, who I guess was just asleep because they don't move at all, and they just go right to the finish, meaning that they are guaranteed to move on to the next round. Pièce de Résistance is up next, moving over to the wall where it barely makes a dent, despite bumping into it several times. Soon Killalot and Matilda decide, this sucks, they have had enough, and start bullying the robot. Sir Killalot lifts them up and actually ends up helping them over the wall. You know, for how menacing Killalot looks, they're actually being quite helpful really. They finish with only 3.8 meters, which is a risky position to be in. Then Caliban comes out without their shell, which just makes the robot look so sad. With the shell on, they actually look really nice. When they've just got their flail spinner, then yeah, it does look quite depressing really. Caliban stumbles along before bumping into Sir Killalot, where in that moment they decide to choose violence and try fighting back. The flails do nothing to Killalot though, who picks them up and easily flips them over, ending their run with 0.2 meters? Okay, Robot Wars, I feel like they moved just a bit more than 20 centimeters. I don't know what the show is on about here. It's kind of wild, really, that they'd say that. Obviously, Caliban didn't move as far as the others, but 0.2 meters? I just find that hard to believe. Victor's run is off to a bumpy start as they get stuck on the bricks after knocking them over. Thankfully, Helpful Killalot strikes again, helping to free them, and Victor, thanks to their high ground clearance and pretty decent drive, they easily make their way to the finish line. Victor has such large wheels that it just feels uniquely gifted for the gauntlet, and overall just probably really well designed for the first two seasons. Like, it's got a weapon at the front to actually deal damage, and it can deal with stuff like the gauntlet. You know, as weird as Victor is, it makes a lot more sense the more I'm thinking about it. Anyway, they're guaranteed to move on to the next round due to them completing the gauntlet. Finally, Demolition Demon rushes out and straight into Sir Killalot, managing to barely sneak past after a little tussle, and then goes face first into Matilda. After some more scrambling, they manage to run away, right past Sergeant Bash, and past the finish. With that, that's the last hope of Caliban moving on out the window, so Caliban is eliminated, which is honestly a shame. Now, I gotta say, the team mentions keeping Caliban, which I wonder if they still have the machine. I doubt it, because this has been like more than 20 years ago, 25 years ago now? Like, I'm almost certain that the robot doesn't exist anymore, but if they do, I'd love to see pictures of Caliban nowadays. It'd be nice to see how the robot's looking after all these years. We move on to the next trial now, where the goal is to knock over as many barrels as possible, with the inner triangle supposedly being safe from the house robots. Napalm starts off first and quickly burrows their way in to try and get safe, though they soon end up getting stuck. They end up finishing with 9 barrels knocked over. Pandemonium is up next and they make a beeline for the barrels, knocking a few over with a very strong start, but then struggle to do much else as they nestle the barrels before Matilda does some of the most damage they've ever done with that chainsaw, and therefore they end their run knocking over just 9 barrels. As after a very strong start, Pandemonium really just didn't do much. I was actually kind of surprised. Victor then comes out next, rushing over into the barrels, but much like in the gauntlet, they actually manage to get stuck amongst the barrels and start just using their bar spinner to cut away at one of the barrels, ending their run with only 4 barrels knocked over. This is quite risky for them for obvious reasons, but I gotta say, the gash that they made in the barrel was pretty impressive. Like, keeping in mind that this is obviously still really early in the UK combat scene, that's not too shabby for a bar spinner. Anyway, Demolition Demon comes up next, slow but steady as they seem to have little issue. They're not as aggressive, but they have no issues dealing with the barrels, and while the house robots do end up attacking them at the end, they've clearly done enough to move on, knocking over 20 barrels. I remember Jonathan Pierce tries to spin it as the house robots are angry, but like, look, Demolition Demon was just simply better. Like, they just had strong drive. Again, it's the most solid looking robot of the entire heat, even if it might not be the most interesting. Finally, it's Pièce de Résistance's turn, and I could not wait to see how this would do as it slowly made its way over, bumped into the barrels, and nothing. Realizing they were probably done, that they just don't even bother anymore. They just try to pick a fight with the house robots, which ends just as pathetically as Matilda easily flips them over, ending their run with, count it with me, 0 barrels. Meaning that's the end of Pièce de Résistance's run. Honestly, it was so funny watching it that I can't even be mad. It was such a hilariously pathetic run that I just find it so endearing in its own way. Finally though, we get to the fight. While this had been better than Series 1, it definitely still takes an awfully long time to get to the action that we've kind of just been which is kind of the whole point that we watch Robot Wars in the first place. Plus, similar to Series 1, I know I'm getting into the criticisms early, we're not even getting into the battles. I'm just as bad as Robot Wars, I'm delaying the actual action. But I'm kind of sad that we don't get Caliban in this round, because it much like Plunderbird, is a major what if for me. I just wish we got to see it fight, because it probably would have actually been quite decent, especially as, you know, most robots here, apart from Demolition Demon, didn't really have strong wedges, so I'd have been curious to see how they did in action. One new change to the season is the new corner patrol zones that the house robots inhabit as now the perimeter patrol zone. And I remember with younger eyes thinking this was cool, as on paper it meant that it was more likely for the house robots to get involved. But thinking about it now, with how the house robots often bend the rules, entering whenever they damn well please, and the amount of arena space it actually takes up, I can start to see why it only is in this one season. Anyway, the first fight is between Pandemonium and Napalm. It's the battle of the dubious lifters, and the robots rush around each other, but neither do anything major at first, with Pandemonium going in for the first notable attack as Napalm seems to be struggling with their mobility. Unfortunately for Pandemonium, they end up getting far too close to Matilda, who flips them over, ending the fight in the most disappointing fashion, as it might have just been about to amp up. Like, the moment this fight looked like it was about to have something happen, over just like that. How dare you get aggressive on Robot Wars? Flipped over, get out. Oh dear. After that is Victor versus Demolition Demon. Demolition Demon rushes over and the wedge is easily deflecting blows from that bar spinner, pushing Victor into the PPZ, where the house robots do little of anything. To continue this rather wimpy fight, Demolition Demon comes in with that rear saw, which instantly breaks. Victor still somehow breaks down. I don't know how, they just do. So the house robots finally get involved and begin picking on the fallen Victor, and Shunt for some reason goes after Demolition Demon, flipping them over, while Victor is cut into by Matilda and lifted by Killalot. Because of the fact that the fight hadn't been called and Demolition Demon was flipped over, they had to get Craig Charles in to explain, just for the record, Demolition Demon is moving on because Victor broke down. Like, they had to make that, like, crystal clear so that there wasn't any confusion. Victor was done from this point on. Meaning that we go on to the heat final between Napalm and Demolition Demon. In this fight, both robots rush for each other, but Napalm initially ends up missing, rushing right past. Though, on the second attempt, they do begin pushing Demolition Demon around the arena. Demolition Demon then in return does manage to wedge Napalm, allowing the house robots to swoop in, though Napalm does escape and the two robots continue to bump into each other. Napalm starts using its lifter as a hammer, which is quite creative weapon usage honestly, as Demolition Demon continues to push them about. Soon a bit of Napalm's rather flimsy looking armour comes off, likely ripped off by the spike on the front. Soon Napalm is pushed into Shunt, who takes a few swings with the axe. The fight ends with Demolition Demon wedging Napalm successfully as Napalm narrowly avoids further damage from Shunt. And with that, the fight goes to the judges, who gives the fight to Napalm? I do not understand this decision in the slightest. Napalm did a bit, sure, but Demolition Demon I felt did much more in this fight, with the ruling apparently being that the house robots attacking means nothing in the ruling, which, well, what's the point of them then? Like, I don't understand. You're telling me that if Demolition Demon was pushing Napalm into the house robots and that meant nothing? Are you kidding me? That's so bizarre. That doesn't make sense. What's the point of the house robots if, I get obviously you want to avoid them, but what's the point if you can't push your opponent into them? That takes out a whole lot of strategy. Now, to get a bit conspiratorial, if I had to guess, I think it was because Napalm is the more interesting looking design, as Demolition Demon is rather boring looking. It looks like something that came out of Series 1, so if I had to guess, I think that's why they went for it, but I don't know for that for certain, and in fact, to come to Napalm's defense a bit, it was more aggressive than I think some will give credit for. Sure, the design is notably less competitive, but I don't want to slam them in particular for what I think was a disagreeable judge's decision. My problem here is more with the judge's decision itself, and not with Napalm. I just feel Demolition Demon kind of got robbed of what should have been their win. Now overall, while I'd say this episode is a shaky start to Series 2, as there are still some annoying carryovers from Series 1, you can still sell some of the experimentation of the early days of the UK combat scene, and there's some other weird stuff as well, such as the PPZ, and there is some overall just weird stuff as well, like the judge's decision of the final fight. I overall still felt it was far more promising than Series 1. It feels like the teams, for the most part, have had time to better understand what they're in for with the show, and the show itself just feels overall much more confident in itself. Decisions like replacing Jeremy Clarkson with Craig Charles, I know this has been said to death at this point, but it was such a monumentally better decision to have Craig Charles hosting. It's to the point where even when they brought Robot Wars back in 2016, people were wondering where the hell Craig Charles was. He's become iconic to the show. And of course, with the debut of the now legendary house robot Sir Killalot, I still feel in general it stands above Series 1. It's a shaky recommendation, but if you were to start watching Robot Wars, Series 2 Heat A wouldn't be the worst. It's still a little shaky, so I can't recommend it unless you're really into robot combat, but if you are really into robot combat, there might still be something to enjoy here. Anyway, with that all being said, I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, please be sure to leave a like on the video. Comment down below what you thought of this episode. If you've watched it, you can check it out on Mech Plus. It's a great official way of watching these episodes. It's the way I do it personally when I'm taking notes for the reviews. I genuinely think you should check it out. It's honestly really nice to get to see these in a crisp quality. I'm not being sponsored to say this, by the way. I just really like Mech Plus. I just think it's a really great way of watching these. And if you can share this video around, that'd be super, super appreciated. But with that all being said, I'll see you all next time. Bye, guys!